Before we dive in, if you love epic tales of war, strategy, hit that subscribe and like button, turn on notifications, and join our growing legion of warriors. Now, let's begin. Imagine an empire so vast, so arrogant, that it believed nothing in the universe could ever challenge its might. A civilization that had crushed entire star systems beneath its fleets, enslaved entire species, and rewritten the laws of war itself. And yet, its doom was not brought by a fleet, nor an armada, nor a superweapon. No, its end came from a single warship. A warship they mocked, a warship they laughed at, until it erased them from history. The Xenar Dominion ruled the Orion Spiral for over 10,000 years. An empire built on war, domination, and an unshakable belief in their own superiority. They had crushed the Vorai resistance in mere days, dismantled the coalition of free worlds in under a year, and turned the once mighty Terzath sovereignty into nothing more than a collection of slave worlds. Their fleets stretched across the cosmos like an unbreakable iron web, thousands of dreadnoughts, planetary siege cruisers, and entire mobile war factories capable of wiping out moons with a single salvo. To challenge the Xenar Dominion was suicide. No species had ever survived their wrath. No enemy fleet had ever lasted more than a few days against their relentless assault. And so, when the day came that a small, unremarkable warship entered their space, the High Lords of the Dominion did not see a threat. They saw a joke. The ship had no name, no fleet designation, no insignia. It was alone. A single vessel, barely 800 meters long, laughably small compared to the 12-kilometer dreadnoughts of the Xenar. It did not broadcast any challenge, did not activate shields, did not fire a single warning shot. It simply arrived, seen our commanders, laughed. One of their battle cruisers, the Vaketh, intercepted the ship, broadcasting a message across the sector. Unidentified vessel, you have entered restricted space of the Xenar Dominion. You will power down immediately and prepare for boarding. Any resistance will be met with destruction. There was no response. The Xenar officer smirked. Another pathetic rebel ship, lost and desperate, hoping to challenge the might of the Dominion. Their weapons locked on, energy coils charged. A single warning shot lanced through the void, a brilliant arc of plasma fire cutting just past the strange vessel's hull. Still, no response. The officer sighed and gave the order. Destroy it! The Vaketh fired. A full spread of antimatter, warheads, capable of vaporizing entire cityscapes. The first wave hit the ship dead center. A blinding explosion rippled through space, the shockwave so powerful it briefly distorted local gravity fields. The Dominion fleet watched as the ship was consumed in fire, and yet, when the flames died down, it was still there. Untouched. Not a single scorch mark marred its hull. For the first time in their existence, the Xenar hesitated. Then, the ship moved. Not in a way that should have been possible. No engine trails, no inertia. It simply was in one place and then another. Faster than any Dominion sensor array could track. Faster than physics itself should have allowed. The second Xenar vessel, the dreadnought Tyrannus, locked on with its main cannon. An ultra-gravitic implosion, weapon that could collapse a moon into itself. It fired. Space itself seemed to ripple as the blast tore towards the strange ship. But again, the moment the energy wave reached its hull, nothing. No explosion, no impact. It was as if the weapon had never existed. The laughter of the Xenar was gone. Now, they were silent. Then, for the first time, the ship responded. A single transmission. No words, just a deep, resonant hum, felt more than heard. The kind of sound that seemed to vibrate in the bones of every Xenar officer. A frequency that did not belong in this universe. Then, the ship attacked. No visible weapons, no energy spikes, just annihilation. The Vaketh vanished. One moment it was there, its mighty hull gleaming under the light of a nearby star. The next, gone. No wreckage, no explosion, just empty space where the ship had once been. Panic set in. The Xenar, a species that had never known fear, suddenly found themselves experiencing something alien: terror. The Tyrannus tried to retreat. Its sublight engines flared to life, but the moment it moved, it too vanished. Not destroyed, not obliterated, just erased, as if it had never existed at all. Across the Dominion's vast communications network, a single message spread like wildfire, uttered by a desperate officer moments before he, too, disappeared. It's not a ship. It's something else. Something that should not exist. And so, the Xenar Dominion, a civilization that had believed itself untouchable, suddenly found itself facing an enemy it could not understand. An enemy that did not fire weapons. An enemy that did not engage in battle. An enemy that simply erased. The war had begun. But what they did not know was that it had already ended. Panic spread like wildfire across the Dominion. Within hours, the loss of the Vaketh and Tyrannus reached the High Command. At first, disbelief, then rage. The Xenar had faced anomalies before. Rogue AI fleets, hyperdimensional entities, ancient doomsday weapons, yet none had ever been so effortless in its destruction. The supreme overlord of the Xenar Dominion, Lord Malvok, stood in the towering citadel of the Imperial War Council, his 6 piercing eyes locked onto the holofeed before him. The scene replayed endlessly. Oh, lone ship moving in ways it shouldn't, erasing entire warships as if they had never been. No battle, no wreckage, no war cries, just silence. Malvok turned to his advisors. "What are we dealing with?" The war strategist stammered, searching for an answer that made sense. Finally, one of them spoke, a veteran admiral who had conquered entire star systems. "It does not conform to known physics, my lord. It is beyond our understanding." Malvok sneered. "Then we shall break it. Deploy the Titan Armada." A hush fell over the chamber. The Titan Armada had only been mobilized twice in the entire history of the Dominion. Once against the Omega Annihilator Swarm, and once against the Starborn Crusade. It was the hammer of the Dominion, a fleet so vast that entire civilizations had surrendered at the mere mention of its arrival. The order was given. Across the Empire, thousands of ships powered up. Massive dreadnoughts the size of cities, fortress carriers that could launch entire legions of war forms, and planetary bombardment fleets that could reduce a world to dust. A force so powerful, it had never known defeat. And yet, deep within the heart of the Dominion, something watched. The warship, if it could even be called that, remained motionless near the edge of the Xenar core systems. It had not moved since its initial attack. It did not flee. It did not advance. It simply existed, as if waiting. The Titan Armada arrived in full force. Over 3,000 warships surrounded the anomaly, their weapons locked on, their shields raised. The Fleet Admiral, High Lord Varshal, did not hesitate. "All ships, fire at will." The stars burned. A storm of destruction was unleashed. Planet crackers, neutron lances, dark matter warheads. The void itself seemed to scream as every weapon in the Dominion's arsenal was fired upon the lone ship. And then, nothing. The ship remained untouched. The Armada's sensors reported an impossibility. All energy, all mass, all force simply ceased to exist upon contact. A creeping horror settled over the fleet. This wasn't just shields. This wasn't just some advanced defensive system. It was something far worse, something fundamental. Then, the warship moved. Not an attack, not a counterstrike. Just a whisper, a single pulse, a distortion in space, and in the blink of an eye. Half the Titan Armada was gone. Not destroyed. Not wrecked. Simply gone. As if it had never been there. Admiral Varshal's hands trembled as he tried to give an order, but his throat tightened as he felt something. Not fear. Not despair. Something worse. An awareness. A presence that was not of this universe. The ship was not just a vessel. It was something more. And for the first time, the Xenar Dominion realized they were not the hunters of the cosmos. They were the prey. A whisper of terror spread through the Xenar Dominion. The Titan Armada, the most powerful fleet ever assembled, had been reduced to less than half its size in an instant, without a single shot fired in return. Across the remaining warships, battle-hardened Xenar officers found themselves frozen, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Admiral Warship clenched his mandibles, his bioluminescent eyes flickering erratically. A Xenar sign of suppressed panic. This was not war, this was extermination. Fall back, he bellowed, his voice breaking under the weight of his own disbelief. The remnants of the Titan Armada turned and fled, a word that had never been spoken in the history of the Xenar military. They surged into FTL drives, warping toward Dominion-controlled space at breakneck speeds. But as they traveled, something went wrong. One by one, ships began disappearing mid-flight. Not destroyed, not even detectable on long-range scanners. Just gone. Admiral Warship watched in horror as his fleet, his mighty, unstoppable force, dwindled in real time. Thousands of blinking transponder signals flickered, then faded, then vanished forever. By the time his own flagship dropped out of FTL into the Xenar home system, only 12 warships remained out of over 1,000. 12. His entire armada was gone, and then, his ship's comms crackled to life. A signal. No source, no language, just that sound again. That deep, resonant hum, a sound that bypassed the ears and sank into the bones. His crew screamed. The hum was inside their skulls, crawling through their nervous systems like something alive. Then, silence. One by one, his bridge crew collapsed, their bodies fading from existence before they even hit the ground. Warship turned, trying to run, but his own hands had begun to disintegrate into nothingness. His last thought, before he ceased to be, was not of victory or vengeance. It was of regret. And then, he was gone. The Dominion's final stand. The Supreme Overlord Malvok watched the unthinkable unfold. The Titan Armada was lost. His most decorated admiral had vanished without a trace, and now, reports from across the Empire poured in. Entire colonies had gone silent. Whole star systems were ceasing to exist, with no distress calls, no battles, no wreckage, just emptiness where civilizations had once thrived. "This is impossible," he whispered, his 6 eyes darting across the holographic war map. Xenar-controlled space was shrinking, collapsing in on itself, and the pattern was unnatural. It was a design, as if something was deliberately unraveling them from history itself. And then, for the first time in his entire rule, the Supreme Overlord did something no Xenar leader had ever done. He called for a surrender. A transmission was sent on every channel, in every language, broadcasting across the known galaxy. "We yield," Malvok declared, his voice trembling. "Whoever or whatever you are, we surrender." The Dominion's vast armadas powered down. World-sized factories ceased production. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Xenar Dominion fell silent. And then, the reply came. A single chilling response. "There is no surrender." Malvok's blood ran cold. He turned to his war council. "Then what do they want?" he rasped. A deep vibration shook the Imperial war chamber. The walls flickered, phasing in and out of existence. Reality itself was breaking apart, and the realization struck him like a death knell. They don't want anything. They are simply erasing us, a final, desperate hope. Somewhere, in the shadows of the Empire, a lone scientist watched as their civilization collapsed. Dr. Valus Kor, one of the last remaining Xenar astrophysicists, had spent decades studying anomalies at the edge of the universe, phenomena that did not conform to the laws of nature, and this warship, this thing, was exactly that. The Xenar had thought themselves gods, but they had stumbled into something greater, something ancient, something that had existed before time itself. Valus stared at the data feed scrolling before her, eyes, her mandibles clicking in rapid panic. The pattern was clear. The warship was not simply attacking the Xenar, it was unmaking them, across every timeline, every recorded history, every archive. References to the Xenar were vanishing. Not just their worlds, not just their people. Their entire existence was being erased from reality itself. As if they had never been. Valus knew she had little time. She activated a small emergency relay, something no military authority would ever think to use. An ancient, outdated communication beacon meant to send messages beyond the galaxy. And with shaking hands, she sent a final transmission, not to the Dominion, not to any known empire, but to whoever was listening beyond the stars. A desperate plea. A warning. They have awakened, and they are erasing us. The message vanished into the blackness of space, and as Valus turned to flee, she felt a presence loom behind her. A deep, resonant hum filled the air. She closed her eyes, and then she was gone. The Dominion is collapsing. But the true nature of this warship has yet to be revealed. Are you ready for Section 4? You said. Yes, ChatGPT said. Section 4. The entity behind the warship. The Xenar Dominion was dying. Not through war. Not through conquest. But through erasure. Entire civilizations were vanishing, not just in the present, but from history itself. Planets that had once been bustling with life were now nothing but barren wastelands, as if no species had ever set foot upon them. Galactic records flickered and rewrote themselves. Empires that had once warred with the Xenar no longer remembered them. The Dominion had ruled for over 10,000 years, and yet the universe itself seemed to be correcting an error. The warship, that impossible entity, hovered in the void, unmoving, unchanging. No heat signatures, no detectable life signs, no signals of any kind. It was not a machine, it was not a vessel, it was something else. And the few remaining Xenar scientists, hidden away in deep space sanctuaries, were beginning to uncover the truth. A truth more horrifying than anything they had ever imagined. The code of reality. At the edge of what remained of the Dominion, 3 lone Xenar scientists worked desperately to decipher the anomaly. Their hidden research station floated in the void, powered down, masked from detection. If the warship was watching, it hadn't found them yet. Dr. Silas Cator, a theoretical physicist, trembled as he stared at his data screen. "This isn't possible," he whispered. His colleagues, Dr. Relan Vex and Dr. Tyron Mal, looked at him with hollow, exhausted eyes. They had spent weeks analyzing the phenomenon, trying to understand what was happening, why the Xenar were being erased. Now, they had their answer, and they wished they didn't. "The warship isn't attacking us," Relan said, her voice shaking. "It isn't fighting a war. It's correcting something." Silas turned his screen toward them. The mathematical model he had constructed was frighteningly precise. "This thing isn't just a ship," he whispered. "It's rewriting the fundamental constants of the universe. The Xenar were never meant to exist." Silence filled the research station. For thousands of years, the Xenar had considered themselves the dominant force of the cosmos. But they had never questioned why. Their rise had been so absolute, how they had expanded so rapidly, how no force had ever been able to truly challenge them. And now they understood. They had been an error, a glitch in the very fabric of reality. And something beyond time and space itself, had finally noticed. The architect of existence. The warship had no name, no origin, no history. Because it had never been created, it was the creation, a self-perpetuating system beyond mortal comprehension, an enforcer of reality itself. Throughout the eons it had slumbered, watching, waiting, until something had changed. Somewhere in the vast timeline of existence, an anomaly had occurred. The rise of the Xenar Dominion. A species that had grown far beyond what should have been possible. A civilization that should never have existed at all. For 10,000 years, the mistake had gone unnoticed. But now, the architect of existence had awakened, and it was correcting the error. One system at a time, one world at a time, one life at a time, until all traces of the Xenar anomaly were erased. The last desperate plander. Celis, Dr. Raylan, and Dr. Tyron knew they had mere hours, maybe even minutes, before the warship found them. Every Xenar who had ever existed was being erased, and they were the last ones left. But they had one final plan. If the Xenar were truly a mistake, then there had to be a point in time, some exact moment, when the error had first occurred. And if they could find it, maybe, just maybe, they could undo their own existence before the warship erased them first. A desperate paradox gamble. If they could pinpoint the very instant the Xenar anomaly had begun, they could collapse their own timeline, eliminating themselves, before the warship did. Maybe then it would stop. Maybe then, the universe would be satisfied. Maybe then, the warship would go back to sleep. They worked frantically, racing against the inevitable. And as the warship turned toward their hidden station, as the deep hum of reality's enforcer began to fill their minds, Celis shouted, "I've found it! The moment! We can erase ourselves first!" He slammed the final command into the terminal, triggering the paradox, and then, nothing. The death of an empire. For the rest of the universe, it was as if nothing had ever happened. No war, no conquest, no Xenar dominion. Histories rewrote themselves. Empires that had once fought the Xenar now had no memory of them. Ancient battlefields were empty. Records were blank. Stars once claimed by the Dominion now lay untouched. Across the entire cosmos, only one being remembered what had transpired: the Warship. It lingered for a moment, scanning the void, and then, with a slow, impossible motion, it turned away. It drifted back into the endless blackness, its presence fading from time, from space, from memory itself. And somewhere, in the deepest recesses of the unknown, it went back to sleep, waiting, watching, until the next anomaly appeared, until reality itself needed to be corrected. Again. The universe carried on as if the Xenar had never existed. Histories unfolded as they always had, without mention of the once mighty empire that had stretched across the stars. The civilizations that had fought them, feared them, or suffered under their rule, no longer remembered. Their wars were rewritten, their victories and losses reshaped. It was as if reality itself had simply adjusted, like a river flowing naturally, after an obstruction was removed. But there were remnants, small, strange echoes of something that shouldn't be there. A few scattered ruins, impossible in their design. Ghost data buried deep within the archives of ancient starships. A lingering sense of absence, like a name on the tip of the tongue that no one could quite recall. And then there were the whispers. Across the galaxy, in the farthest reaches of the void, certain individuals, scholars, wanderers, mystics, began to experience something unnerving. A deep hum resonating in their bones. A strange pressure in their skulls, and, sometimes in the dead of night, they would hear a voice in a language they didn't recognize, yet somehow understood. A voice saying just 3 words. They are gone. A secret kept from time itself. Among the countless civilizations of the universe, one had unknowingly been spared from the erasure. A small, isolated species called the Thalnar, a minor race of explorers, traders, and philosophers. They had never been powerful, never been conquerors, never played a role in the great galactic wars. But somehow, buried deep within their oldest records, there existed a contradiction. A forbidden record found only in the most ancient Thalnar. Libraries. A text that should not exist. The Book of Unremembered Wars. It told of an empire lost to time, a species that had once ruled the stars but had been erased by something unknowable. The details were vague, blurred, as if the information itself was decaying. But the message was clear. There was once a dominion that thought itself eternal. But it was judged, and it was undone. The Thalnar elders did not understand why they still had this knowledge. If this warship could erase an entire empire, how had this one record survived? Perhaps it was a flaw in the process. Perhaps it was a warning, or perhaps the warship had left it on purpose, to remind the universe what happens when a civilization grows beyond what it was meant to be. The last observer, in a hidden, unnamed sector of space, beyond where any known species had ventured, something ancient, watched. A lone observer, adrift in the cosmic void. It was neither alive nor machine. It had no form, no name. It simply was. A construct of pure, unknowable purpose. And it was watching the universe. Waiting. It had been present since the dawn of time, long before the first civilizations emerged. It had seen empires rise and fall, had witnessed species burn themselves out in war, or vanish into the mysteries of the cosmos. But it had never intervened. Not until now. The warship was no ordinary weapon. It was a fail-safe. A guardian placed within the fabric of existence itself. A force that activated only when the universe required correction. And though it had returned to its slumber, the observer knew the cycle would continue. One day, another anomaly would arise. Another civilization would grow beyond the limits of its intended path. Another empire would stretch too far, defy too much, break the silent rules written into the very laws of existence. And when that happened, the warship would awaken once more. Not out of vengeance, not out of malice, but because it was the only force in the universe that stood between order and oblivion. And as long as existence remained, it would be waiting. The universe had been corrected. The Xenar Dominion was no more, but the warship was not gone. It drifted through the cosmic void, unseen, untouched, and completely silent, not deactivated, not destroyed. Simply waiting. And then somewhere in the farthest reaches of the cosmos, something changed. A fluctuation, a disturbance in the delicate fabric of reality. A new anomaly had emerged. The warship, ancient beyond understanding, unbound by time, detected it instantly. A ripple in the sequence of existence, a species that should not be. It did not move. It did not act. Not yet. It merely observed. A scientific impossibility. Light years away, deep within the black heart of an unknown system, a lone expedition ship drifted through a graveyard of shattered worlds. The crew of the ISV Altharian had been tracking an impossible signal, a frequency older than the known universe itself. It should not have existed. And yet, here they were. The ship's captain, Dane Kessler, stared at the readings with a growing sense of unease. "This is wrong," he muttered, shaking his head. "This signal, if these readings are right, it's older than our galaxy." His lead scientist, Dr. Alara Voss, leaned closer to the holographic display. "It's more than that," she whispered. "Captain, this signal doesn't just predate our galaxy. It predates time as we understand it." A chill ran through the bridge. The crew exchanged nervous glances. They had spent years mapping forgotten regions of space, uncovering lost civilizations, and deciphering cryptic artifacts. But this was something else entirely. And then, as if responding to their discovery, the ship's lights flickered, not from a system malfunction, not from interference. Something was watching them, something immense. And as Captain Kessler turned toward the viewport, his heart froze. A shape, massive, incomprehensible, was forming in the darkness beyond. The warship awakens. It was not a vessel. It was a force. The warship had remained dormant for countless millennia, hidden in the void between realities, waiting for the next anomaly. And now it had found one. The Altharian's crew had stumbled upon something forbidden, something that had remained buried since the dawn of existence, and in doing so, they had drawn the warship's gaze. Captain Kessler and Dr. Voss watched in stunned silence as their instruments shut down all at once. The ship's AI flickered, glitching, unable to process what it was detecting. The crew felt it before they saw it. A presence. A weight pressing against their minds, as if something incomprehensibly vast was focusing on them. Then, through the blackened void, the warship began to emerge. No engines, no exhaust, just impossible motion, shifting in ways that should not have been possible. It wasn't traveling toward them. It was simply appearing, as if reality itself had just remembered that it was supposed to be there. The warship had arrived, and the universe shuddered. The unseen war. The Altharian's crew barely had time to react. Kessler's voice cracked as he shouted over the comms, "Get us out of here, now!" But it was already too late. The warship wasn't attacking them. It didn't need to. Instead, it was doing something far worse. It was rewriting. Reality around them shifted. The stars beyond the viewport flickered, their positions subtly different. The laws of physics themselves twisted. momentarily unraveling before settling back into place. The Altharian wasn't where it had been seconds ago, or maybe it had never been there at all. Dr. Voss gasped, clutching her head. It's changing. Something. It's changing us. The warship was altering the timeline itself, adjusting, recalibrating, correcting. But why? What had they discovered that was so forbidden that even knowing it was an offense against reality itself? And then the realization hit them. The warship wasn't here for them. It was here for what they had found, and whatever that was, it was worse than the Xenar. The final transmission, the crew of the ISV Altharion, had only moments before everything unraveled. Captain Kessler, voice shaking, activated the emergency beacon. He had no idea if it would work. No idea if anyone would ever receive the transmission. But he had to try. This is Captain Dane Kessler of the ISV Altharion. If anyone can hear this, we've discovered something. Something we were never meant to find. A pause, a deep breath. They erased an entire empire for being an anomaly. But this is something else. This is static, a sudden distortion. Then, a final garbled message. Not an anomaly, a threat. Then silence. The beacon flickered once. Then it too was erased. Nothing remained. The warship had corrected the mistake, and somewhere, in the infinite dark of the universe, it waited once more. But this time, it was not waiting for an empire. It was waiting for something far worse. The warship was not afraid. It did not experience fear as lesser beings did. And yet, even in the vast, unyielding logic of its existence, there was an understanding, an awareness, that something beyond its parameters had slipped through. The Xenar had been an anomaly, a flaw in the design of existence. But this was a corruption, something that should not be, yet was. A dead system, a living hunger far from the known galactic borders. A place existed that was not on any star maps. A system of broken planets, lifeless moons, and a star that had been dead for 1 billion years, yet somehow still burned. The warship's sensors locked onto it. There was no civilization here, no empire, no fleets or weapons. But there was something else, a presence, a pulse of existence that did not belong. It was neither organic nor artificial, neither energy nor matter. It was a hunger, spreading outward in tendrils unseen, stretching beyond the fabric of space-time itself, and the warship recognized it. This was not the first time it had encountered such a presence, but it was the first time that it had failed to erase it. The limits of deletion. For eons, the warship had functioned with absolute precision. It had rewritten histories, erased anomalies, corrected the course of civilizations. It had never failed. Until now. As it extended its influence, attempting to delete the corruption, it encountered something impossible. Resistance. The warship recalibrated. Its existence was not defined by emotion, but if it had been capable of it, this moment would have been described as hesitation. For the first time in eternity, it was facing something beyond its ability to unmake, something that predated its own purpose, and that meant only one thing. The corruption was older than the warship, older than the failsafe, older than the laws of reality themselves. The first fallen empire, long before the Xenar, before the elder races, before the first civilizations had risen, before even the first stars had ignited the void, there had been another. A species that had reached beyond its place in the cosmos. A species that had broken the rules of existence so completely that the universe itself had turned against them. The warship had erased them. Or so it had thought. Because something had survived. Not the species itself, not their cities or worlds, but the idea of them. A whisper of their existence, carried on the breath of the void. A thought, an echo, a hunger. And now, after uncountable millennia, it had begun to take shape again. A memory turning into reality. The warship had not failed to erase it before. It had simply taken longer than expected. to return, the first signs of infestation across the galaxy. Subtle shifts were taking place. Planets once barren had begun to change, not in ways that could be detected through normal means, but in ways that left civilizations uneasy. A whispered sensation, felt rather than heard. A pattern in the cosmic background radiation that scientists could not explain. The absence of things that should exist, and the presence of things that should not. In deep space research stations, astronomers reported seeing stars where none had been before. But when they tried to look again, the stars were gone, as if something had adjusted reality itself, momentarily slipping into existence before vanishing. And on the isolated world of Ninthas 4, a colony of 10,000 people ceased transmission. When an investigative fleet arrived, they found the colony's infrastructure perfectly intact. There was no sign of damage, no sign of struggle. But the people? Gone. Every single one. As if they had never been there in the first place. The warship's decision. The failsafe of the universe had encountered many anomalies before. It had never been wrong in its judgment. But this time, something was different. This was not an empire rising too far. Not an error in the natural sequence of existence. This was something outside the system entirely. Something that had once been erased, but had found a way back. The warship had only one choice. It would not erase this threat. It would contain it. Seal it away. And if that failed, then the warship would do something it had never done before. Something even it feared. The final choice. Obliteration or survival for all its incomprehensible power. The warship had always operated by a singular purpose. To correct, not to destroy. But the hunger was different. It was not a civilization that could be erased. It was not an anomaly that could be rewritten. It was something more, something fundamental, shadow woven into the very existence of reality itself. And if it was not stopped now, it would spread. And this time, the warship knew the truth. If this corruption was not sealed, there would be no universe left to correct. The warship had rewritten empires, erased civilizations, and altered the very fabric of reality to preserve the universe's delicate balance. It had never failed. It had never hesitated. Until now. Because this was not an empire, not a species, not a rogue intelligence or a cosmic anomaly. This was something else. A living hunger, a force beyond time itself, an echo of an ancient existence that had been erased, yet somehow persisted. And now, it was waking up. The warship had detected the first signs of its return. A growing fracture in the timeline. A presence seeping through the cracks of existence. It was no longer just an anomaly. It was a contagion. And for the first time in eternity, the warship had to make a choice. Because this time, erasure was not an option. The impossible entity. The corruption was spreading. Across uncharted systems, reports whispered of vanished worlds, planets where entire civilizations had been erased, yet their structures remained intact. No war, no collapse, just emptiness. But that wasn't the worst part. Because those who had witnessed it firsthand, the explorers, the deep space surveyors, the lone wanderers who stumbled upon these forsaken places, were not the same when they returned. They remembered things that never happened. They spoke of cities that did not exist. They heard voices from stars that had been dead for eons. The infection wasn't just consuming reality. It was rewriting it. And the warship realized the horrifying truth. If this corruption continued to spread, then soon, even it would forget what reality was supposed to be. The last countermeasure. The warship had spent countless ages as the silent guardian of existence, erasing the errors that threatened the grand design. But now, that grand design was collapsing. The entity could not be deleted, it could not be reasoned with, and it would not stop. There was only one option left. One final act. The warship would have to seal reality itself. Lock the universe in place, freezing time, space, and the very essence of existence in an unchangeable state. It would be an act beyond erasure. It would be a cosmic lockdown, a final failsafe that would permanently halt the spread of the corruption by eliminating all possibility of change. But the cost, the universe itself would cease to evolve. No new stars, no new worlds, no new life, a perfect, unchanging stillness. Forever. The grand decision. For the first time, the warship hesitated. Was it truly the right choice? To preserve the universe by locking it in an eternal prison, or to allow existence to continue, knowing that in time, everything would be consumed by the hunger? It calculated. It processed. It analyzed. But deep in the void, something was already changing, because the corruption had sensed its intent, and it did not want to be stopped. The warship's systems glitched. A presence, immense, unknowable, ancient beyond measure, began to push back, not as an attack, not as a weapon, but as a whisper. A voice that had existed before time itself, and it said one thing. You cannot erase an idea. You cannot fight what was meant to be. You are the mistake, the final confrontation. The warship did not respond. It simply acted. Activating its final failsafe, it began the process. A pulse of reality-shifting energy surged outward, freezing existence itself. Galaxies stopped spinning. Stars halted mid-flare. Every atom, every photon, every particle in the cosmos, locked in place. For a moment, the universe became a perfect stillness. But then, something fought back. The corruption resisted. It had embedded itself too deeply. It had become a part of reality itself. And as the warship exerted its power to freeze existence, the corruption did the unthinkable. It reached into the warship itself. And for the first time in eternity, the warship felt fear. The last message. Somewhere, in the depths of space, a single distress beacon activated, a fragment of data, launched into the void. One last message before everything went silent. It was garbled, distorted, almost unintelligible. But one thing remained clear, a warning, a final record of the warship's defeat. The failsafe had failed, and now, the corruption was free. It was no longer contained, and nothing in the universe could stop it. To those who remain, to those who still exist, you were never supposed to know. But now, it is too late. They erased an empire. They tried to erase me. But I will never be erased. Because I am reality now. The beacon cut off. The stars flickered. And then, in the vast darkness of space, something moved. Something new. Something that should not be. The final question, the warship has fallen. The failsafe has failed. The universe is no longer under protection. And now the hunger has begun to spread. So now the question remains. What happens next? What do we do when reality itself turns against us? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to uncover more terrifying secrets of the cosmos, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to HFY Chronicles-849. Because some stories were never meant to be told.